Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Tonight, we're diving into something truly chilling. 7 of the most disturbing true forest ranger horror stories. These aren't just campfire tales. They're real experiences from those who work deep in the woods, far from safety, where the line between the natural and the supernatural blurs. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? I love seeing all the different places you're tuning in. Now, let's begin. This happened to Ranger David Thorne, a man who'd walked the remote paths of the Blackwood National Forest for 20 years. He wasn't easily spooked, but one patrol, late one October, changed him. The air was turning sharp, biting, smelling of damp earth. He was covering a section near an old forgotten fire lookout tower, miles from any main road. The sun dipped behind the pines, casting long shadows. He was about to head back to his truck when he spotted it. A small, bright red rubber ball sitting perfectly centered on a mossy rock beside the old access road. New, completely out of place in this untouched wilderness, David paused. A kid's toy? Here? He picked it up. It felt strangely warm. He scanned the dense woods. A prickle of unease spread across his skin. He called out, "Hello? Anyone out here?" His voice echoed, swallowed by silent trees. Nothing, just the wind sighing. He told himself it was a lost hiker's item, but deep down his gut tightened. It didn't feel right. He continued his patrol, but calm had chipped away. Every snap, every rustle made him glance over his shoulder. The woods felt watchful. He reached the old lookout tower, its weathered wood creaking. As he circled the base, he found something else. A small, carefully folded child's jacket, blue with yellow trim, placed neatly on the lowest step. Not dropped, but arranged. And beneath it, a tiny, intricately carved wooden bird resting on a clean, flat stone. Now David's heart pounded. This wasn't a dropped item. This felt deliberate. He knelt, trembling, touching the cold wood of the bird. No tracks around. The silence pressed in, heavy. Even the wind died down. He pulled out his radio, tried to call dispatch. Static. He tried again. Nothing. He checked his battery, full charge. His satellite phone was dead. A jolt of pure dread went through him. This was beyond odd. This was terrifying. He decided to do a quick sweep. His ranger instincts were screaming. He moved slowly, eyes scanning every shadow. Then he saw them. Faint impressions on the damp earth, too small for an adult. Child-sized footprints leading away from the lookout, deeper into the thickest, darkest part of the forest. And strangely, they seemed to go in a perfectly straight line, unhindered by bushes or fallen logs. He followed, compelled by duty, even as every fiber of his being screamed to run. The trees grew closer, blocking out the last light. The air was colder, biting. Then he heard it. A faint, high-pitched giggle, not a happy giggle. It sounded hollow, distant, utterly devoid of warmth. It seemed to come from all directions at once. He froze, his hand instinctively going for his pistol. "Hello?" he called out, a strained whisper. The giggling stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, terrifying. He could hear his own blood rushing. He forced himself to take another step. He was looking for a lost child. He had to. Then, through a gap in the trees, he saw a glimmer of red. The rubber ball. It was lying there, waiting. But this time, it was surrounded by more of those tiny, strange wooden carvings. They were arranged in a perfect circle, facing inward. He looked up through the skeletal branches. Perched on a high, impossibly thin branch, a figure. Small, childlike, but its proportions were all wrong. Too long in the limbs, too large in the head and its eyes. They seemed to glow with a dull, malevolent red. It just sat there, watching him. David didn't wait. He didn't think. He turned and ran, blindly crashing through the undergrowth. He heard the giggling again, closer, and behind it, a soft thump, 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 like tiny heavy footsteps following him. He didn't look back. He ran until his lungs screamed, until he burst into the relative openness near his truck. He scrambled inside, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life on his third try. He sped away, leaving the darkening woods behind. He never found the child. No reports came in. No one was ever reported missing. He never told anyone what he saw. He just logged an unusual occurrence. But he never goes back to that lookout tower. He still patrols, but his calm is shattered. Every rustle, every shadow, every unexplained sound makes him flinch. He knows that some things in the wilderness aren't just wild, they're playing. And sometimes, the toys they leave behind are meant to lure you into their game. He often wonders what would have happened if he'd stayed. The thought still makes his stomach churn with cold dread. Ranger Ben Carter was a man of routines. Every Tuesday, he'd hike the old logging road trail deep into Shady Pines State Park, checking for illegal campsites or downed trees. A familiar, usually uneventful path, but one muggy afternoon in July, with the air thick and still before a thunderstorm, his routine was shattered. He was about an hour in, nearing the abandoned timber mill, when he smelled it. A sickly sweet odor, like rotting meat and cheap perfume, heavy in the humid air. It didn't belong in the woods. He paused, scanning the dense foliage. No dead animals, no garbage. The smell seemed to emanate from a cluster of ancient hemlocks off to his left, beyond a dense patch of ferns. His gut told him to investigate. This was something wrong. He pushed through the ferns. The smell grew stronger, almost suffocating. And then he saw it. Not an animal, not a person. It was a chair. A worn, faded red velvet armchair, sitting perfectly upright in the middle of a small clearing. It looked like it had been plucked straight out of someone's living room. Around it, arranged in a crude circle, were various small personal items. A chipped porcelain doll's head, a single leather glove, a tarnished silver locket, all old, weathered, but clearly placed with intention. The air around the chair felt heavy, strangely cold, despite the summer heat. Ben stood frozen, his skin crawling. This was beyond odd. This was unsettling. He called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" His voice sounded weak, swallowed by the quiet. The trees seemed to lean in, watching. He reached for his radio. Static. His emergency satellite beacon? Nothing. Fear shot through him. He was completely alone, and something had done this. He took a cautious step closer. The smell was almost unbearable. He noticed a faint, dark stain on the velvet seat, too dark to be dirt. His heart pounded. He felt an intense sense of being watched, not by an animal. Then, from the deep shadows behind the chair, he heard a sound. A low, raspy whisper, too distorted to make out words, but undeniably human-like. Faint, but it seemed to vibrate through the air, chilling him. He whirled, gripping his pistol. Nothing. Just dark trees, but the whisper lingered, a phantom breath on his neck. His mind screamed to run, But duty held him. He forced himself to take another step. As he did, a small dark object rolled out from under the chair's armrest. A human finger bone. He gasped, a guttural sound of pure horror. This wasn't a game. This was something ancient, something that lured, something that consumed. A sudden, sharp snap came from the dense undergrowth to his right, impossibly close. He spun, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. For a fleeting second, he saw it. A shadow, tall, thin, moving with unnatural, jerky speed, melting into deeper shadows. But he felt its presence, a cold, hungry gaze. And then the whisper came again, louder, right behind him. "Sit with me," Ben screamed, a raw, primal sound of terror. He didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, blindly crashing through the ferns, stumbling over roots. He heard a soft, rhythmic creak. Creak, creak, following him, like the old armchair itself was moving. He didn't stop until he burst onto the main trail, miles away, gasping, shaking uncontrollably. He never reported the chair or the bone. He knew it sounded insane. He just marked that section of his patrol map as restricted access. He still patrols, but avoids that trail like the plague. He knows now that some parts of the forest aren't just wild, they're malevolent. They have their own twisted sense of comfort, their own morbid invitations. The memory of that chair and that raspy whisper still haunts his dreams, making him wonder what would have happened if he had, for even a moment, considered sitting down. He knows, deep down, he would never have gotten back up. Ranger Sarah Jenkins was still new to the isolation of the Silver Pine Wilderness. Her first deep winter patrol, solo, checking remote weather stations. She was proud, but the forest, draped in heavy snow, sometimes felt less like solitude and more like emptiness. One afternoon, deep in January, she was on a snowmobile, heading towards an old, rarely visited weather station in a valley known as the Devil's Basin. The snow was fresh, sparkling, the air so cold it burned her lungs. The silence was absolute, heavy. As she neared the clearing where the station stood, something caught her eye. A perfect, circular patch of snow, about 10 feet wide, directly in front of the station, looked swept clean. Not melted, not windblown, but like someone had meticulously cleared it, leaving perfectly smooth, dark earth. Her snowmobile tracks were the first on this trail in weeks. She cut the engine. The silence crashed back in, deeper. A shiver, not from cold, ran down her spine. She dismounted, crunching through the untouched snow. No footprints led to or from it, just the cleared ground. Her stomach tightened. "Hello?" she called out, her voice thin and small. No reply, only her ragged breathing. She checked the weather station, everything functioning, but her eyes kept darting back to that impossible circle. Who or what had done this? As she turned to leave, she noticed a faint line, like a shallow furrow, leading from the circle into the dense pines. It looked like something heavy had been dragged. Driven by morbid curiosity and duty, she followed it. The line was difficult to see, constantly disappearing and reappearing. It led her deeper, away from the trail, into a section of forest that felt ancient and dark. The trees grew unnaturally close, creating a suffocating tunnel. Then she heard it, a low guttural moan, like an animal in pain, but too deep, too drawn out. It seemed to come from just ahead. She gripped her snowmobile keys, her heart hammering. The air felt colder here. The furrow stopped abruptly at the base of a massive gnarled oak, and there, pressed into the snow was a single, unsettling imprint. Not a bear paw or a deer hoof. It was long, too long, and ended in 5 distinct, sharp points, like a hand, but not a human hand. A sudden sharp crack came from behind her. She whirled. Nothing. Just dense, silent trees. But the air around her felt heavy, charged. Like something was there, watching. She felt an intense pressure, a cold dread seeping into her bones. Her gut screamed to run, but her legs felt like lead. Another sound, closer. A soft shuffling scrape, like something dragging itself through the snow just out of sight, to her left. Then to her right, it was circling her. Panic flared. She had to move. She spun, plunging back towards where she thought her snowmobile was. Her feet sank deep into drifts. The shuffling sounds followed, always just behind her. Sometimes too fast, sometimes too slow. She didn't look back. Her lungs burned, vision blurring. She burst out of the tree line, gasping, her snowmobile a blessed sight. She scrambled onto it, hands shaking so badly she could barely insert the key. It roared to life. She twisted the throttle, tearing through the snow, not daring to look back. She didn't stop until she hit the main park road, miles away, shaking uncontrollably. She never told anyone about the cleared circle or the impression. But that day, she learned that the silence of the winter forest isn't always empty. Sometimes, it's just holding its breath. And some things that clear the snow aren't doing it for human reasons. She still patrols, but never alone, and always with a wary eye on the shadowed corners. The Devil's Basin remains a place she avoids, where the cold deepens, and the wilderness whispers secrets too unsettling to comprehend. Ranger Mark Jensen had seen it all. 25 years patrolling the Redwood National Forest. He was a man of logic, but one blistering August, in the driest part of the season, something happened that twisted his logical world. He was on a solo patrol, deep in the Whispering Canyon, far from any marked trails. The air was thick with dry pine needles and dust, so hot you could see the heat radiating. His job was fire watch, but his senses told him something else was wrong. For 2 days, he'd been hearing it. A low, rhythmic thumping sound, faint and muffled, deep within the canyon walls, too regular for an animal, too deep for falling rocks. He tried to pinpoint it, but the sound seemed to shift, echo, always just out of reach. He told himself it was the heat, but his gut kept nudging him, whispering this was different. On the 3rd day, the thumping stopped, replaced by an eerie absolute silence. No birds, no cicadas, nothing. He was nearing a cluster of ancient redwoods when he found them. Not an animal carcass. Instead, arranged in a perfect, unsettling spiral around the base of the largest redwood were dozens of small, white river stones, not naturally occurring here, and in the very center, on a piece of bark, was a single, perfectly clean, gleaming human tooth. Mark froze. His blood ran cold despite the scorching heat. A human tooth. Here, miles from civilization, arranged in this bizarre, ritualistic way. This wasn't a lost hiker's oversight. This was intentional. This was wrong. He scanned the trees, hand going to his radio, but knew it was a dead zone. He pulled out his sidearm. His heart hammered. What kind of person would do this? He circled the arrangement, eyes sharp, looking for any trace. Nothing. No footprints. As he leaned closer to examine the tooth, a sudden sharp crack echoed from the dense undergrowth behind him. He whirled, weapon raised, and then he saw it. or thought he did. Just for a fraction of a second, between two massive redwood trunks, something dark and impossibly tall seemed to shift. Not move, not run, but just shift in a way that made no sense. Too quick, too fluid to be a person, yet too solid to be a shadow. His brain screamed it was nothing, but his body was already responding, a primal surge of terror. He didn't wait. He started backing away slowly, eyes locked on the spot. Then, from behind the trees, a voice, low, guttural, and utterly inhuman. It mimicked his own voice, twisted and distorted, saying his name. Mark. The sound made the hair on his arms stand on end. His entire body went rigid. It wasn't an echo. It was a direct, sickening imitation. It was playing with him. He didn't hesitate this time. He turned and ran, a desperate, panicked sprint. He crashed through brush, scrambled over logs, his lungs burning. He heard heavy footsteps behind him now, impossibly close, matching his pace. Each thud shook the ground. He burst into the small clearing where he'd left his ATV, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life on the third try. He threw himself onto it, twisting the throttle wide open, tearing through the canyon, not looking back. He didn't stop until he reached the ranger station, miles away, covered in scratches and sweat, face pale and eyes wide with a fear he'd never known. He never reported the tooth or the shifting figure or the voice. Who would believe him? He just logged unusual activity. But he never went back to Whispering Canyon. He still patrols, but the logic he once lived by feels thin now. He knows there are things that walk those ancient woods that have no place in any natural history book. Things that mimic human sounds, things that leave unsettling gifts. And sometimes, those things just want to play. He now knows the wilderness can hold a darkness so ancient and intelligent, it makes your own humanity feel like a fragile, temporary thing. The thought of that distorted voice still makes his stomach twist. Ranger Eleanor Ramirez had always been drawn to the history of old mining towns in the Sequoia National Forest. One crisp autumn morning, she discovered something that didn't belong to any human history she knew. She was deep in an isolated canyon, mapping old prospector trails. The air was cool and smelled of pine. She was following a faint deer trail when she saw it. A perfectly smooth black stone, about the size of her fist, resting on moss. Too perfect, too dark for the natural geology. It felt alien, not carved, but naturally smooth to an impossible degree. Eleanor picked it up. It was surprisingly light, subtly warm, almost vibrating with a faint energy. She felt a strange, hypnotic pull, a soft hum in her ears that wasn't there before. She dismissed it as fatigue, tucked the stone into her pack, but an unsettling feeling began to settle over her. The forest felt less friendly, more watchful. The hum from the stone seemed to linger. Every rustle seemed too loud, every shadow too deep. As she navigated a narrow ravine, she noticed something impossible carved into the sheer rock face. Intricate geometric symbols. Not petroglyphs, precise, deeply cut patterns, complex and symmetrical. They looked etched as if by immense, precise heat, almost glowing faintly with a dark, inner light. Her heart pounded. This was profoundly unsettling. She reached for a radio, but it was dead. Her satellite phone, a useless brick. Panic, cold and sharp, crept into her veins. She felt utterly alone. The hum from the stone in her pack seemed to intensify. She scanned the canyon walls. The symbols seemed to stretch on, appearing in other places. Then, from the depths of a dark cave entrance she hadn't noticed, a new sound emerged. A low, rhythmic clinking, like pieces of obsidian being gently struck together. Too regular, too intentional. It seemed to pulse, matching the hum from her pack, creating a discordant harmony that grated on her nerves. She gripped her hiking pole, eyes wide, searching the black maw of the cave. She felt an intense, undeniable presence emanating from within. A cold, ancient awareness. She forced herself to take a step closer. The clinking grew louder, more insistent, coming from all around her. It was like the very rock was alive. Then she saw it, in the deep shadows of the cave. A pair of eyes, large, luminous, pulsing, with the same dark, internal light as the carved symbols. Utterly devoid of warmth or emotion. Not animal eyes, too still, too ancient, too knowing. A sudden sharp whir filled the air, like 1,000 tiny gears spinning at once, directly behind her. She whirled. Nothing. But the hum from her pack was deafening now. The clinking from the cave intensified, becoming a frantic beat. The luminous eyes seemed to grow brighter, focusing on her. A cold dread, a feeling of being utterly insignificant, washed over her. Elena didn't wait. She didn't think. All her training shattered. She turned and scrambled up the steep side of the ravine, abandoning the deer trail, clawing her way up. She heard the clinking follow her, growing louder, now accompanied by a faint, high-pitched screeching that made her ears ring. She didn't look back. She climbed until her hands bled, until she burst out onto a higher, sunlit ridge, gasping for breath, shaking uncontrollably. She never reported the stone, the carvings, or the eyes. Who would believe her? She just marked the canyon off limits. She still patrols, but avoids that canyon. The stone, she threw it into an icy river. But sometimes, when the air is still, she still feels that faint vibration in her teeth, hears that rhythmic clinking in the deep quiet. She knows now that some parts of the wilderness are not just wild, but ancient, home to things that predate humanity, things that carve their own histories into the earth. And sometimes, those things just wait for someone to stumble upon their silent, glowing secrets. Ranger Alex Thorne had always found comfort in Adirondack winters. The hush of falling snow, the crisp air, endless stretches of white. It was a time of quiet patrols, checking old trapper cabins. Most were decaying shells. This particular day, late in February, was no different. The snow was deep, pristine, and the silence absolute, save for the crunch of Alex's snowshoes. He was headed towards a cabin marked Trapper's Rest, tucked away in a remote valley. As he broke through a thick stand of pines, he entered a clearing that wasn't on any map. Circular, 50 feet across, unusually bare, as if nothing grew there but a thin layer of snow. And in the very center stood a structure. Alex stopped dead. It wasn't a cabin. It was a bizarre archway, woven from interlocking branches and, disturbingly, bones. 8 feet high, dark and skeletal against the white landscape. His gut twisted instantly. This wasn't natural, not human. The branches were too perfectly bent, too tightly woven. And the bones, integrated into the structure, some forming supports, others curved into strange patterns. Some were clearly animal, yet others too large, too thick, or with unnatural grooves. The snow around the structure was untouched, not a single footprint, as if it had simply grown there. Alex slowly unslung his rifle, He called out, "Hello? Park Ranger?" His voice sounded feeble, swallowed by the silence. No reply. Just the faint sigh of wind in distant pines. He pulled out his radio. Static. His satellite phone. Dead. A cold dread, far deeper than the winter air, seeped into his bones. He took a careful step forward, drawn by horrifying fascination. As he got closer, he noticed something else. A faint, high-pitched whistling sound, barely audible, like someone blowing across a hollow bone. It wasn't the wind. It was rhythmic, almost melodic, but chillingly discordant. It seemed to come from the structure itself. The air around him suddenly felt impossibly cold, making his teeth ache. He scanned the tree line. Nothing, but he felt it. A profound sense of being watched, a pressure on the back of his neck. He took one more step and glimpsed something. A flicker of movement within the shadowed archway, too quick to properly register. Thin, dark, melting into shadows. A fleeting impression of something gaunt and impossibly tall. The whistling intensified, now clearly coming from just behind the structure, more distinct, a shrill ancient tune that scraped against his nerves. He stood frozen, heart hammering. He saw it again. A figure, partially obscured, but he could make out an unnaturally thin, elongated shape. It moved with a jerky, almost puppet-like grace, its head tilted at an impossible angle. Its skin seemed to be the color and texture of dark bark, and something glinted where its eyes should be. Then, with sudden, impossible speed, the figure lunged from behind the structure. It wasn't running. It was more like it was falling forward, but too gracefully, too quickly. A guttural, clicking sound erupted from it. Alex's blood ran ice cold. He didn't wait, didn't think. He turned and ran, directly away from the clearing, his snowshoes tangled. The whistling, now a piercing shriek, followed him. He heard branches snapping, impossibly close behind him, faster than any human could move through such snow. He burst back into the main trail, gasping. He didn't stop until he was miles away, shaking uncontrollably. He never reported the structure or the figure. Who would believe him? He just marked that section of his map with a mental avoid. He still patrols, but the comfort is gone. Now, when the wind sighs, he hears echoes of that ancient, bone-chilling whistle. He knows that some things build their homes in secret, and that the beautiful, silent winter forest can hide horrors so profound they make human understanding seem like a cruel joke. He still sees that impossible, skeletal archway in his nightmares. Ranger Sal Reed, a woman who preferred the quiet company of trees to people, had spent 15 years patrolling the Olympic National Forest. One stiflingly hot summer, while conducting a camera trap survey in a particularly old-growth section, a place locals whispered had been sacred, she stumbled onto something that broke her practical world. The air was thick, humid, heavy, with the scent of damp earth. Sunlight barely filtered through the colossal canopy, leaving the forest floor in perpetual twilight. She was making her way through dense undergrowth when she saw it. A line. Not a trail, but a perfectly straight, narrow corridor, 2 feet wide, where every branch, every sapling, every obstacle had been snapped, twisted, or cleanly broken. It looked like something massive had plowed through, but with unnatural precision. Her gut tightened. This wasn't an animal. This was just deliberate and impossible. She followed it, compelled by ranger's instinct. The path led deeper, further off any known track as she walked, She started noticing things. Small river-smooth stones scattered at strangely precise intervals, but these weren't ordinary. They seemed to possess a faint, internal glow, a soft, almost imperceptible blue-white light in the dimness. Her skin prickled. This was too strange. Then she heard it, a faint, repetitive tapping sound, like a small hard object hitting wood over and over, with a strange, inconsistent rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. It seemed to come from somewhere ahead. She stopped, listening intently. Too regular for a woodpecker, too mechanical. The air grew still, heavy. She checked the camera traps she'd already set. The first one she found dead. Its battery, new that morning, was completely drained. The memory card wiped clean, static. She tried her radio. Nothing. Her satellite phone, also dead. A cold dread seeped into her. This felt too deliberate, too focused. She continued, the tapping growing slightly louder. The forest felt watchful, shadows deeper. Every rustle made her jump. She felt an intense, suffocating sense of being observed. She finally broke into a small circular clearing. And there, in the very center, stood a pole. 8 feet tall, impossibly slender, stripped of bark, gleaming pale. At the top, carved into the wood, was a crude, almost alien-looking face, with 2 large, empty eye sockets and a jagged vertical line for a mouth. And around the base of the pole, arranged in a perfect circle, were dozens more of the faintly glowing stones. As she stood there, staring at the pole, the tapping started again, but this time, it wasn't ahead. It was all around her, from the dense undergrowth. Tap, 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 tap. It seemed to multiply, a dozen different subtle tapping sounds, all around, drawing closer. She spun, her rifle suddenly feeling too light. Her flashlight beam cut through the shadows, catching glimpses of movement. Thin, dark, impossibly quick shapes flitting between the trees. Too fast to get a clear look, but she could tell they were tall, gaunt, and moved with a jerky, unnatural grace. Then, a low, chittering sound, like a swarm of giant insects, erupted from the tree line. It was not a natural sound. It was ancient, unsettling, filled with chilling, intelligent malevolence. Her heart hammered, breath caught. She could feel them, surrounding her, their movements mimicking hers. If she took a step, a flicker of movement followed. If she froze, they froze. They were playing with her. Then, a sharp crack exploded directly behind her. Something had snapped a thick branch, too close. Sal didn't hesitate. She didn't think. All logic vanished. She turned and ran, plunging back into the dense undergrowth. The chittering rose to a frenzy, and she heard the sound of countless small, light objects tapping against tree trunks as they pursued her. She didn't look back. She crashed through bushes, stumbled over roots, her lungs burning. She finally burst onto her service road, where her truck was parked, shaking uncontrollably, gasping for air. She fumbled with the keys, started the engine, and sped away, leaving the tapping and the chittering behind. She never reported what she saw. Who would believe her? She just made a mental note to avoid that section of the old-growth forest forever, marking it danger, unexplained phenomena. She knows now that some places aren't just wild. They're occupied. The ancient woods hold things that aren't animal, aren't human, but something else entirely. Something with its own silent, unsettling rituals and a cold, watchful intelligence. The memory of that stripped pole, the glowing stones, and the chittering in the shadows still makes her stomach twist with a deep, lingering fear. She now believes some deep primal parts of the forest aren't for us, that they're simply taken. And sometimes you just step into their world by mistake, and then you become part of their game, forever changed and forever listening.